Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here, and I am back again with another Boris TV tutorial. And as you can see in front of you, this is a tutorial I did a while back about creating a very cool American Idol style lighting effect inside of Adobe's After Effects. Now looking back at this tutorial, I think to myself, can I take this idea and improve on it? And maybe to get a little crazier, can I build this type of effect inside of my Avid non-linear editing application? Now, most people would think, no way, there's no way you could build that easily inside of an NLE. Well, believe it or not, I have. And if you take a look, I think I've even taken the effect to the next level. Believe it or not, the setup actually took longer to do than the effect itself. Okay, let's quit out of QuickTime and let's Alt-Tab into Avid's Symphony. Okay, now the first thing that we're going to need to set up our effect is a title. Now, you're going to see where I'm going with this in just a second. What I'm going to do is navigate up to Clip. I'm going to come down to New Title. We'll give the Title tool a second here to load up and prompt me as to which title tool I want to open. We're just going to use the standard Title tool. Now, what I'm going to do inside the Title tool is I'm actually going to create a lighting rig. Now, the lighting rig is actually very simple. It's just going to be a series of circles. So what I'm going to do is simply grab the Circle tool, and we're going to draw a relatively small circle. I'm going to hold the Shift key down here just so that we can snap it to make sure that it's an actual circle here. And I'm going to position it roughly here. And all we're going to do is simply copy and paste circles right across the full length of the screen. I'm simply using copy and paste. And what I'm going to do is once I have these that stretch all the way across the screen, what I'm going to do then, I'll just paste that in here, very good, is I'm going to take all of these and we're going to make a complete grid. Now I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me create this entire thing because of course I've already created it. I have it right here. So you can see here is our lighting grid. Now the great thing with creating it like this is I can really go in and pick and choose what I want to be a light and what I don't want to be a light. Now you'll remember from the intro, if I hit B on the keyboard on both Mac and Windows to edit this into my timeline, I actually only use the outer edge of circles here to create my lighting grid. So all I'm going to do is I'm simply going to right click and I'm going to say Edit Title. Now I'm using Media Composer, or actually Symphony version 6.5. So I have the ability to right click on the title and say Edit Title. If you don't have that ability because you're not using version 6.5, simply step into effects mode and you can simply click the Edit Title button to get to where I am right now. All I'm going to do is select all the circles on the inside of the grid. There we go. We're just going to say Save. And you'll see we now have the lighting grid all set to go. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to apply the Lens Flare 3D effect. So let's get into the Effects palette by hitting Control and 8 on Windows, Command and 8 on the Mac. And now what I need to do is I need to apply Lens Flare 3D. Now what's important for me to point out before I apply Lens Flare 3D is that we are accustomed to using two different Lens Flare effects previous to version 8 of Boris Continuum Complete. And of course I'm talking about Lens Flare and Lens Flare Advanced. Now Lens Flare and Lens Flare Advanced are really now not necessary with Lens Flare 3D. But the team at Boris Effects knows that you're going to have legacy projects that you're going to need to go back to because you've used this effect before, you know, if you ever need to call that project back up again. So if you ever need to find those two effects, you can simply navigate down to the BCC Obsolete section, and there they are right there, Lens Flare and Lens Flare Advanced. But ideally for new projects moving forward, you really only need one Lens Flare plugin, and that's Lens Flare 3D, and it can be found right here in the light section, right here, Lens Flare 3D. What I'm going to do is simply take it, I'm going to drag and drop it right down here onto my shot. Now I'm not going to hold Alt for Windows or Option for the Mac, I'm just going to grab it and drag it and drop it. And you'll see once it's there, the lens flare appears, but my title has disappeared. I need to get that information back because obviously we need to use it as a reference. So what I'm going to do is simply step into effects mode. And I'm going to come up here to the Title Matte section. We're going to drop that down, and I'm simply going to select the first option, Apply to Title Matte. As soon as I do, you're going to see my lighting grid, or my future lighting grid, has reappeared. Now, before we move on, I want to point out about Lens Flare 3D is that it's a fantastic plugin, especially if you don't really know what type of lens flare you want. Why is it a great plugin? Well, guess what? You've got an absolutely staggering amount of presets to get you going in the right direction. Now, one that I always like to use is the standard 105 prime. This is one that I kind of use all the time. It's kind of like my go-to, except there's one problem with it. The problem is that I always like to have a big chroma fan that sort of goes with it, sort of right about in here. Well, the other great thing about the effect is that getting in and customizing these flares and creating new ones is very easy. What I'm going to do is just drag right down here, and I'm going to come down to the Chroma Hoop, and I'm just simply going to turn it on. And there's the Chroma Hoop right there. What I'm going to do is just drop down the parameters, and I'm going to adjust its intensity a little bit here, just to make it stand out a bit more. And let's adjust its scale a little bit here. Very, very nice. Now, of course, the effect isn't really that good unless I can save it and use it over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate right back up to the presets section, and I'm going to say save. Now you're going to see I have a previous version of it right here, and so what I'm going to do is just save over top of it. I'm going to be asked if I want to replace it. I'm going to say sure, and what I'm going to do now is just switch to a completely different preset. It doesn't even matter which one. Now once I've switched presets, what I can do is simply at any time come back up. I can say let's load a preset, let's load the 105 prime Chroma Hoop, and simply say OK, and there it is, all set to go. So you can see creating, saving, and using presets very, very simple inside of Lens Flare 3D and really across all of the effects inside of Boris Continuum Complete 8. Now what I'm going to do is just apply the effect again here, just drag it down, I'm going to hit Shift and Y, we're going to apply it to the title matte. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually create the effect itself of those flashing lights. Now to set it up, like I said, the actual creation of these circles for our lighting grid is actually the hardest part of the entire process. And you'll see I already had it set up, so it actually made our life a lot easier. So what we need to do now is we need to tell the effect that we want it to look at these circles and use them as a reference for lights. So the first thing I'm going to do is just twirl up title matte here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to come down to the global intensity. You'll see right now it's set to almost 90. I'm going to set it down about 35. So we're going to have it fairly small. What we're going to do now is I need to switch over because right now this effect is just using a built-in light. You'll see the position XY is really where the light is supposed to be. But what I want is I want each one of these to be a light. So you'll see right over here the light source is set to built-in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch that to be luminance. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to see the flare disappear. Now, why would that be? Well, you'll also notice as soon as I switched from luminance or from built-in to luminance, you'll see right here built-in is now my option. But as soon as I switch to luminance, luminance now becomes my option. Now, as soon as I drop this down, the very first thing the effect is asking me is, what is your luminance map? What I'm going to do is just drop that down and say, use the filter layer. Now, as soon as I do, it looks like nothing has happened. What I'm going to do is just turn off size, and I'm going to turn off color, and you're going to see right away I now have this crazy new effect. It's a little bit more intense than I think than what I want. So let's get in and let's make some minor adjustments here. What I'm going to do is simply come all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to turn everything off here except for the actual flare itself. Turn disks on, we'll turn polygons. Actually, we'll turn all these off, not on. I'm going to turn rays off, and you'll see we now have a very cool sort of lighting rig. Now it's a little bit dim for my liking, so I think what I'm going to do is just bump this up a bit. Let's set it to be about 45. That's looking a little bit more realistic. You'll see we've even got a little hoop around each one of the lights. The only problem is as I click through, it doesn't really do anything. So let's set this up to actually flash like real lights would on the American Idol set. Now I know you're probably thinking, well, this is going to be some complex effect that you have to create. Believe it or not, it's not. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to navigate over here to light flicker. I'm going to leave the type as smooth. And let's set the speed somewhere up about 20. Now as soon as I do, you're going to notice nothing really happens. Well, that's because the amount is set really low. It's set to 5. Let's set it up at about 90. And I want you to watch what happens as soon as I hit enter. You're going to see now all of the lights have suddenly changed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to render this out here. I'm just going to render it to the Y drive here. And what we're going to do is we're going to be back in a second when this is done rendering, and I'm going to show you what the end result of this effect looks like. Okay, so our render's done. Let's check out our very cool marquee lighting effect. I'm just going to come in. I'm simply going to hit the play button and look at how cool that looks. Now, of course, if this is a little bit too slow for your liking, what you can do is simply step back into effects mode. What you're going to do is navigate right down here to the flicker speed, and you can obviously increase that or decrease that to have the lights flicker as fast or as slow as you want. But for right now, I'm happy with the way that they look. Okay, let's get in and add the 2 more elements that we need to add to finish up this composite. What I'm going to do is hit Control and Y in Windows, Command and Y on the Mac to create a new video layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply right up here inside of 3D objects. I'm going to grab the BCC Extruded Text effect. We're going to take it, drag it right down here, drop it onto that empty layer. I'm again going to step into effects mode. Shift and Y again is my shortcut. Effects mode right here as well. Again over here at the top of your timeline. And what I need to do is launch the text window. And we'll just type in here appropriately enough, Boris Effects. I'll simply say apply so that it appears down here in my timeline. Now what I want to do is give this title the same sort of look, the same lighting look, same color as the lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our material preset here is set to none. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the diffuse eyedropper and we're going to choose sort of a shade of purple kind of about here, just below the sort of intense part of the light. Just that our text has that purple look, because obviously the text is going to be impacted by the color of those lights. So let's come down here to our transformation section. We're going to want to adjust the master scale. Let's set it at about 70, maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe we'll set it at about 67. I think that's looking pretty good. And let's give this a bit of a rotation. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to come to the rotation here. Let's just adjust the Y just a little bit here. Let's make sure we actually have the bar here. There we go. Just rotate it a little bit that way. 15 degrees, not too bad. We'll jump down to the end. I'm just going to add a master keyframe. I don't mind if it applies it to everything, every parameter in here. We'll just make this value minus 15. And what I also want to do is just give it a little bit of a, is it the Z rotation we want to adjust here? Let's see. Make sure we actually grab the bar here. There we go. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Just turn it just ever so slightly. So that's at minus 11, and we'll put this one here at 11. Very cool. So what we have is we have the title rotate. And what we're going to want to do is have a little bit of a lens flare gleam across the top of the text. Very cool. Now the other cool thing inside of Media Composer is you'll see I applied this effect on top of the other effect that I already had rendered, but Media Composer, because it's at the bottom of the chain, remembers that it's already rendered, so it's not going to unrender anything. If I have to go back and render something else on top of that, it's going to be a lot faster render. Okay, so again, I'm going to be going back to our favorite effect, Lens Flare 3D. What I'm going to do this time a little bit differently, though, is inside of lights, I'm going to hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac. We're going to take Lens Flare 3D. I'm going to Alt drag it down on top of this effect. You'll see everything disappear. Let me just step out of effects mode. There is our lens flare and our 3D title on top of our background here. You'll see that if I step into effects mode, I have the two effects stacked on top of each other. Now, what I'm going to do is pick a preset for this look. Now, one thing that I want to point out here, and I'm going to go back to the preset that I just created here, the 105 prime Chroma Hoop effect, or the lens flare preset. Once I select it, you're going to see I get a very weird look. What's important to remember is that when I save that preset out, it's going to remember everything involved in that preset. And in this case, when I created that, I had the lens flare applied to a title mat. Now in this case I don't, so what I need to do is simply turn that off and everything will go back to normal. But in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to add a soft flare with colored fog, just like that, to give me sort of the same look that I already have going on. Again, look at that, a preset, and it's actually going to work itself out perfectly. Now what we're going to do is just come back. Let's actually come back right to the start of the effect here. Now this flare is a little bit too bright for my liking. I think I'm going to cut it down to about 40. Even that's a little bit not enough here. So let's just bump it back up to maybe 60. There we go. Let's position the lens flare sort of in the upper left-hand corner of Boris Effects here. We'll just add a keyframe. I'm just going to come all the way down to the end here. And we just want it to move across the top of the B. I'm going to add another keyframe here. Let's give it its endpoint. And of course, we're going to need to add a couple intermediate keyframes here. We'll just sort of put that in the middle. Let's see, that's looking pretty good. And you'll see literally with a matter of a couple keyframes, we can create this effect. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's step out of effects mode here and let's give this a quick render here. And you'll remember, like I said before, the lighting effect took about 4 minutes to render, whereas this has the 3D extruded text and the lens flare on top of it. And it's going to take less than a minute to render. Now, once our render is done, what I'm going to do is simply step out of effects mode, come right back here to the beginning of our timeline and hit play. And you know what? I think I've taken the American Idol cool lighting effect And I think I've created the next level. And the next level not only involves an awesome looking effect, it also involves you not leaving the comfort of your NLE. So if you have any questions, you have any comments, or you have any tutorial requests, you can send them to support@boriseffects.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.